Hi everyone, my name is Keanu Eugene and I'm a writer. I mainly focus on publishing on Webnovel and the numbers you're seeing on my screen are all mine. So within the last 4 years of the beginning of my writing journey to now, I have gotten 20 million views, 50,000 concurrent readers, and within only the first 2 years, from January 21st, 2021 to December 10th, 2022, I made over 5,000 US dollars. This is all from writing and I started completely free. And if anybody wants to know how I did it, everything is available for free. The entire plan right here on my YouTube channel. The video should be showing up on the top left or in one of the corners of your screen right now. And if anybody wants to actually see more credentials from me, I will be linking another video, which is the live stream, the 7-hour live stream I just got done with. But don't worry, in the comments right here, you will see 2 timestamps where I begin analyzing and breaking down one of the a one shot from one of the lovely people in my Discord who wrote it and wanted me to critique it, and he actually asked me to rewrite it. So you actually see me write live in person on my live stream. So both of those will be linked and appearing on your screen or in the comments, or you can just check my YouTube channel because currently I only have like 5 videos up, right? But with those out of the way, if you trust me now or you check the links and you still like me, let's get moving with today's video. So I will be focusing on plot, planning, and genre, the 3 most important things before you start writing your book, and the things that people tend to undervalue, because no matter how good your book is, if you mess up these, even if your writing is perfect and you have perfect prose, you won't find the people who actually care about reading what you write about, right? So the goal is just to break down all of these to help you understand what order you should do them in and how they impact each other. And the reason that we're doing this before character is because character fits into these, or these can fit into character. But regardless, these have finite things to learn. There's only so much you can learn about these, but character is a study on human nature and the nature of living beings. So there's infinite things to study. So the sooner we get this out of the way, the sooner we can get to writing different types of characters. Now, where's my column? Great. Now let's get into genre, market, and audience expectations, because these are similar but different things, right? So this is a list of the common um, genre keywords that books fall into. So for romance, you get the young adult. There isn't really much middle grade romance because preteens don't really look at romance like that. They usually go like books about friendship or like that kind of things. There are also period pieces. British period pieces are pretty common. Victorian period pieces are also good. Romantasy is romance fantasy. It's kind of its own genre ish. It's more romance, but they add a thin veil of fantasy onto it. So it's like people falling in love with fairies or into the Feywild and that kind of stuff usually. Tragedy is in everything, so tragedy can fit everything. Forbidden love is pretty big in romance, right? And these are these are generally things that if you go into romance, your audience will be expecting some of these in your books, right? This is a complete marketing tool, young adult. But I put it here because a lot of people find the most success in romance in young adult, and the most successful genre of all time, and the largest market in of all genres is romance, because you have up to 8 billion people who can relate to your book, right? Who can relate to human interaction. um, Fantasy and science fiction are what I write, and you get certain things like epic, which is massive scope, young adult, which again is usually teenage protagonists, coming of age stuff. So Harry Potter went from middle grade in the earlier books when he was 12 or 13, and as the books got bigger in scale and scope and became more epic and dangerous, they went into young adult, and I don't think they ever got into adult because there wasn't anything like too explicit in the book aside from like fantasy violence, traditional fantasy violence. There's historic, which is when you want to be historically accurate to a certain time period. Medieval is a big genre. It's usually knights, dragons, those kind of things. Low fantasy is not much magic. That's Game of Thrones. High fantasy is a lot of magic. So I believe that would be like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings? Yeah, Lord of the Rings definitely, because there are lots of different fantasy races, which is another trope of fantasy. Grimdark is very brutal, so that's Game of Thrones. That is where consequences matter a lot, and it's very difficult to find like hope in the darkness. Dystopian is after the world ends. Urban is using the current day and putting a fantasy spin on it. So, um, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the Harry Potter spin-off, would be urban fantasy, but in a period piece because it would be in the past, right? So it would be in the past, which it makes it kind of a period piece, and it would be urban because they're in cities, but the magic is also in the city with them. Tragedy, that can happen anywhere. Portal fantasy, um, Narnia, The Chronicles of Narnia, or The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland. Someone enters a portal or a doorway or a wardrobe or a rabbit hole and goes into a different world. And isekai is somebody dies and is reincarnated or reborn with their memories in a different world. Science fiction and fantasy share a lot of these, so most things that go into science fiction can go into fantasy and vice versa. But the main difference between them is that fantasy is magic, science fiction is magic as technology. So, what magic does in fantasy, technology does in sci fi. So, instead of casting a spell to fly, you would get rocket boots, things like that. So, they have steampunk, which everything is steam engine, cyberpunk, high tech. Low sci fi means it's close to what we have today. So, a lot of the technology from, if you've seen the movie The Martian, could be passed off as like real. Like if you told someone The Martian, the technology in it was real, they would have very little reason not to believe you aside from us not being to Mars yet. Dystopians, End of the World, I've already been through Grimdark and Tragedy. But these are some of the more popular ones that we'll be going through. But after we get to plot engines and plot breakdowns, you can check the timestamps below because everything in this video will be timestamped. Because if you know what you're going to write and what you want to write, after we do plot breakdowns, I'll be going through every single one of these, giving you a breakdown of an example of like a popular piece of fiction and breaking down every part of it that you need to know, and then and along with market expectations, right? So if you already know what you want to write, after plot breakdowns, head to the timestamps and just go to where you need to go. Now, the next one is thriller and mystery. Thriller/mystery, and horror. These a lot of the times come together, but I separated them because they have some nuances. I have written some of my volumes, like maybe 50,000 words at a time, as some of these, but I usually use these sparingly on a scene level, not on a book level. So my knowledge of them is very limited. Science fiction, fantasy, romance, I can do. I can rattle off a lot of things from that. But thriller, mystery, and horror, particularly thriller and mystery, because I know how to write horror, because that comes with adventure and stuff. But thriller and mystery, I can only give you so much, and I did some research, and I tried to make as much sense of it as possible. So I'm at least getting you a good foundation. And I even had someone who now finished his mystery novella in my live stream, the 7 hour live stream that ended 3 hours ago, and I'm currently making this video. Wow, yeah, and he gave me the all clear that I'm not adding any misinformation out there. So, after genre and audience expectations, right? The audience is expecting some of these things, and yeah, let's go into the audience now. Well, let me explain thriller first, right? So, thriller, mystery, and horror. The main thing with these books is the sense of progress. These books want you to turn the pages. These books are often smaller because they want you to finish it in one sitting so that you buy the next book, right? This is the most important thing here for horror: descriptive content, meaning content warnings. So if your book has villains or characters performing certain deeds, you want to have somewhat of a content warning, not a spoiler, but just tell people that there might be sensitive topics in this book. So if they have trauma around that, it just gives them a heads up. But the main thing you want to focus on for all of these is suspense and atmosphere, and to understand what your content is. If you can get suspense and atmosphere down and a sense of progress, that's like what Stephen King specializes in. His suspense and atmosphere is second to pretty much none that I can imagine, right? And he's very good at writing page turners because he's good at that. He also has some descriptive content, so he's a bit controversial, but that's beside the point. But thriller is mainly thriller and horror. You've seen slasher films; it's essentially that, and the mystery is who done it. That's like the big mystery genre that audience will kind of expect when they hear mystery, because Agatha Christie and like Murder on the Orient Express is, and those books are so famous. Glass Onion is a modern version of that where someone dies and everybody's in the house, like Glass Onion or Knives Out. If you've seen either of those count as that. So next up we'll go to planning, which is, yeah, it's the most important stage because writing is difficult, but if you get planning wrong, nothing you write matters. Right? Planning. Focus on your audience. Who is this for? Your audience is you. Because why write something you don't want to read? Why write something you didn't wish you could go and pick up on a shelf and read spoiler free? Right? It's you. Humans aren't that unique. So whatever you think is unique about your taste, it's not. There are 8 billion people in the world. There are at least 100,000 with your same taste. The only question is, will they know about your book? And that's where marketing comes in. But for now, all you can focus on is writing the perfect book, right? And that also segues to the next thing. Ideas are cheap. So a great writer can make a great book out of the most boring ideas. That's pretty much been proven, right? A man named Ove, or I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. It's a book about an elderly man living alone, just going about life in a suburban neighborhood, and a lot of people love that book because the characterization and the character writing is so good that you don't need an exciting plot. It's just an old man going about his business and being slightly annoyed at his neighbors who are trying to be nice to him. That's the entire book. So the ideas don't really matter. It's all about execution. If you're a good writer and you write things well, people will appreciate it and they will like it. Now, how do you come up with these ideas? This is where the what if and the familiar plus the strange meet. The what if is very simple. You go back, you think of something and you add a what if to it. So the book series Her Majesty's Dragons is literally someone sitting down and going, what if the British Royal Air Force had dragons during the Napoleonic Wars? Yeah, that's that's literally it, and those books are great. Um, Lots of books are, what if a boy finds a dragon? What if a girl finds a spaceship? Right? Sounds familiar? Probably. Hmm? What if a puppet comes to life? Lots of what ifs. So you can either do that or you can mix something familiar and something strange, which is a bit more difficult to do. Generally, I would stick to what if, but if you have two things that you're fairly competent about, you can mix it. So if you're, how do I even say this? If you're familiar with swimming, right? And you say, okay, you can, what if you, well, not what if, but someone who could swim really good, right? But the water glows because there's something at the bottom of it, right? So you get a different type of environment while they're swimming. So the swimming the audience can relate to, but why does the water glow? That's strange, and it can be something as simple as that, or it could be something very, very much more complex. But whatever this is also this. This is your unique selling proposition. So ideas are cheap, but execution is the key part, right? But when those come together, you get your unique selling proposition. You get the thing that makes your book special. This is what people undersell in their writing. Okay? If your character can fly, you ideally you do not want it to be a special, super rare thing for them to do. You want to show the reader how somebody who can fly would always be trying to fly. They will always be floating above their chair or above their desk in school. They'd be annoying everyone because they can fly and they want to use their powers. They want to use what makes them special, and the reader wants to read about someone who is a bit special, right? So you have to push your unique selling proposition. This doesn't mean that you have to make your magic system or your technology very convenient and easy to use and with no cost. But if you're going to if you're going to make it very difficult to use, you have to increase the gravitas of the framing of it. We'll talk about framing when we get to scenes, but you can either have something that's um, always in the always casual in the book, which I kind of prefer to do. I prefer to have both because you can mix them, right? So I have someone with the ability to fly, and every time they're talking to someone, they just be floating, right? And I'd make it fun for the reader because so they would always float differently, and everybody would react differently. And then if you had like they could shoot fireballs out of their hand, but they could only do it once a day. Every time they shoot the fireball, it would be a spectacle, right? This is your unique selling proposition, and this doesn't just have to be with fighting, right? This could also be with a relationship. This could also be with like if the how it says if the janitor and the CEO are falling in love with a romance book. Yeah. What is the unique selling proposition? The unique selling proposition is the awkward situations a janitor and a CEO can get into. Yeah. The unique selling proposition would be all the people who disrespect the janitor in front of the CEO, but the CEO can't say anything because that person is their business partner. That is the unique selling proposition. It is the moments that could only be found in your book, in your what if, in your familiar plus strange mixture, and it is what you have to push to the audience. Now, story type. Story type is all of this stuff mixed with your plot, because plot type plus all of this makes your story, and there are a few different plot types which we will go through, right? We'll go through the most popular ones because they are I in like you can come up with hundreds of plot types if you really wanted to, but this is all about the most wide-reaching ones. These are the training wheels you can use before you come up with your own, before you redefine writing and the genre, right? So the story type is all of this plus your plot type. The plot engine is something people don't talk about, and it is something that I am currently um, that I that I came up with kind of, and I focus on my current work. And now I'm 700,000 words in, and it is an amazing idea. Okay, and I will get to that in a second. And then genre expectations, we will go through all of this during well genre market expectations, and we'll go through all of this after we go through the plot breakdown, and then as I'm going through each genre, I'll go through them. But yes, remember, timestamp after the plot breakdown, right? Because that's when you get to go to your genre, or you can go through all if you want to help my watch time, and it'll tell you exactly what you need and exactly what you should expect, and it will give you a breakdown of a very popular example that hopefully everybody in the audience knows. I didn't use anything. I didn't use any books. I used movie examples because those will have more reach. Because I'm expecting some of my audience to be people who have mostly only seen movies and have never read books, like myself. I've actually only read like 50 pages of one book, and all of this is from research and stuff. And I've done pretty well for myself, right? I have the books though. They're right here. I have more Facebooks too, but yeah, uh, uh, yeah, I will go through all of this and just find your timestamp after plot breakdowns, and yeah, you'll be good. Now, plot engines. This is what I was talking about. Plot engines, objective based and character based. People say objective based plot and character based plot, and they never explain anything because, and whenever they do explain, it is always the same thing. It is always your character is your plot, or your plot is your character, or your book is your plot plus your character, and that doesn't help anyone. So, here's what I did. The first book I wrote was all plot, no character. He woke up, he had amnesia, and he had a set of instructions. And the book was all about him trying to get the end of the set of instructions. There was no character in it. Okay? There is a goal and it is clearly indicated. I did this because I was focusing on world building first. That was the first building block, and we'll talk about building blocks further down at the bottom, right? Uh, yeah, we'll talk about building blocks at the bottom. Um, but yes, I did that, and then there's also the big epic quest or the journey plot. So the first one is think Mission Impossible. They have a goal and they have to get it. The second one, big epic quest, Lord of the Rings, right? Or Journey Quest, The Hobbit, or and Lord of the Rings. They're both in this, right? They made the big epic fantasy stories, so they're the best example of it. And then there's character based plot, which is a story driven only by character choices, which I'm currently writing, right? Characterization and character choices. This demands high audience investment. So I do not recommend this if you don't know how to make the audience care about a character, or if you do not know how to entertain the audience with a character that they hate, which is what I'm doing. I chose the hard route. I chose to write a character that no sane person should should sympathize with or empathize with, but make him so entertaining that they want to read. And there are 350 chapters in, so I think I did pretty well. Now, this is the hard part: getting audience buy-in. Some writers can do it in one page, half a page, one sentence. Some people can't do it at all. So you have to um, understand what you like in a story, and if you read stories for the characters, then you have a better shot at doing this because you know what you like and you can simply write that, and people like you will love your characters. The problem is this can easily become bloated because if your character is winding on their path, then you have to write whatever they're doing, right? But it is great for episodic, right? If you're serializing and it's every chapter is a different episode and they don't have to be connected, character driven is perfect because this is how most like sitcoms are made, because it's just a character living their life, making decisions, and the audience gets to go along with them, right? So those are the main two things that you have to understand. Most plots are a mix of both, because the plot, because the objective plot wants to do something and the character changes because of it, or the character wants to do something and that creates the objective plot, right? I chose to separate them, and I can mix them when I want, but I chose to separate them because I want to learn these skills individually before I bring them together. Okay, I'm building the Avengers individually before I build the team. That's the idea, and it's working. So I'm sharing it now. And next up we have plot breakdown. This is where you need to take notes, or go in my Discord where this entire thing it will be available, right? And oh, this is so important. So I'm gonna be using Star Wars: A New Hope and Luke Skywalker's character for this because I think that's a very popular example for this kind of thing. And your plot has three. The story has three parts: promise, progress, payoff. The promise is a very clear indicator that this is what we're going to do. In certain genres like mystery, the promise is implied in the genre. The promise is that you will solve the mystery. In romance, the promise is implied that they will fall in love. They may not get a happily ever after, but they will fall in love and admit their love for each other, right? And the payoff is is the sorry those were the payoff, but the payoff and the promise are kind of the same thing, right? Because the promise is at the start how you promised, and the payoff is when they finally get it, right? So the promise in romance is okay, these people are gonna have a relationship and they're gonna get closer to love, and the payoff is them falling in love, right? So that's eventually the progress is where most people fail, and the progress is why the middle of the book is the hardest to write for most people, because the progress grinds to a halt because they don't set up a proper way to track the progress. Okay, if you want a cheat code, if you have a book where characters have to do something, put one thing here and the other one here, and put checkpoints in the middle. So think of it like a road trip, right? New York to California, and cities in the middle are the road trip. If you have a city every ever so often, it's easy for the audience to track, and the human brain loves two things. It loves numbers going up, and it loves seeing dots on a map get connected. It, yeah, our monkey brains love that. So that's an easy way to cheat. If you shove a map into your book, and every few chapters you show a different part of the map getting filled up as the main characters move, everybody will love your book. Well, at least that part of it, right? The progress will be taken care of. But now back to the A New Hope. Star Wars A New Hope, right? The promise, character promise, and overall story. Overall story is the objective. That's what I'm calling it, right? So the character promise. Luke Skywalker gets his adventure. He stays up at the binary sunset. He doesn't know about the Jedi or the Empire or anything like that. All he knows is he wants to go to space because Tatooine sucks, and it does, right? The overall story promise. The rebellion is fighting the Empire. The rebellion needs to beat the Empire, so we need to help the rebellion. That that's what they show before they showed Luke. So the overall story promise comes before the character promise in A New Hope, right? The progress, the character progress for Luke going to space. He wants to go to space. He wants to be a pilot in space, right? So he goes to space, and what do they do as soon as he gets into space? They say you need to become a Jedi, Luke, because his first promise was fulfilled. So now they have to add another promise and another sense of progress to it, right? So this is why I call it cherry on top. The going to space was one scoop of ice cream, and they said, "Look, you're going to get one scoop of ice cream." Then, when he got to space, instead of one scoop of ice cream, they gave him two scoops, sprinkles, and a cherry on top. They said, "You're going to be a Jedi." That's what you want to do. You want to undersell the promise. You want to make the promise great, right? But undersell it and then give them extra stuff on top of it. And that's what Star Wars did so well. So the cherry on top is becoming a Jedi, and the new progress, the new tracking for progress became his training as a Jedi. It wasn't going to space anymore. It was how good are you as a Jedi, and we saw him train throughout the movie, right? And the overall story promise is it is a journey plot, which means they're going from one place to the next. They went from Luke's house to Mos Eisley to space to Alderaan. Alderaan was destroyed, so that was an objective. They they had to go escape the Death Star. They failed, so that was a setback. Then they got into the Death Star, right? So those were progress points. Obstacles are progress. It's like in a video game. If you're going the right way, they will keep sending stronger people at you, right? And the audience views that the exact same way. The audience sees opposition as you are going the correct way, right? And the stronger the opposition get, the bigger the sense of progress, right? And payoff, the character payoff, right? The first one is Luke gets his adventure. The second one, Luke becomes a Death Star. Is the cherry on top, right? Luke becomes a Jedi. That's the cherry on top. That was never promised at the start of the movie. That's something completely new he got after he finished his first one. So the cherry on top, he becomes a Jedi, and he destroys the Death Star himself. Instead of getting the plans to the rebellion, he destroys the Death Star. For the overall story, the objective, which was help the rebellion, right? That was the entire plan. Just help the rebellion however we can. That was the entire goal. The twist, there was a twist, right? So stories can have twists. Alderaan was destroyed. We have to destroy the Death Star ourselves. So it's a twist and it raises the stakes, which is good. And the cherry on top, we destroy the Death Star ourselves. Instead of just getting the princess, the plans, and letting her take it to the rebels, we become a Jedi, which is the character promise, and we destroy the Death Star ourselves, which is the objective promise. Okay? Star Wars does all of this, and they do all of this at once. Luke trusts the Force, and he destroys Jedi in one scene. That's why it's so good. And we also got like a bunch of other character plots coming together at the same time to make like this perfect moment. So there's a reason it made $1 billion, right? That franchise has $1 billion. And now we go on to now we can start with, so now we have an idea of setbacks, character promise, overall story promise, and progress and payoff, all of these things, and the cherry on top, right? Promise them one scoop of ice cream, then you give them two with sprinkles and a cherry on top. That's now you understand what a plot breakdown is looking like. And granted, not all of them look like this. For example, my current plot with my character driven story has no sense of progress. None. Because there's a promise and there is a payoff, right? And there is no sense of progress. And because it is a character driven story, I have to, and it's in third person omniscient, which is very difficult to write for most people, because you have to be honest with your audience. I showed the audience that the payoff is impossible, right? So the promise cannot be kept. So none of this exists in my story at the moment. It's just a character in a world, and he cannot get what the story promised him. But this is what we call a train wreck story, right? Not because the story is going to crash, but because the story is about one character slamming into another. It is him who was promised this thing and he cannot get it, and the person who promised him it and lied about it. And eventually they're going to meet, and that tension keeps the story going. But to do this, you have to be good at writing characters. You have to be good at framing the story, which is something I've talked about in every video. And I feel like I'll need to make an hour-long video just to talk about that, because if you can frame a story good, you can get away with anything. And I mean anything. Like, I have the most horrific main character who should not be supported in any way, and he's so entertaining that people love him. So, yeah. But now we can get into the specific, right? So, now we're going to get into romance. No, right. Romance, the market expectations. The market expectations for romance are first person limited viewpoint, right? Because romance, they want to feel very personal. First person is where you feel most personal. First person is I said, I ran, I felt, right? And the entire book is from their head, is in their head. It's from their point of view. It also allows you to cheat by not revealing the truth, because they only know what their character knows. So if someone is cheating on them, they won't know until they walk in the door and find them cheating, which is a very common thing in a romance book. Past tense is also very common. I haven't seen a romance book in present tense, right? And past and present are the usual tenses. Point of view and tense are usually set standard. I will make an entire video of that when I'm going through the chapter 1 basics, which I will be prepping for at the end of this video live, so you can see. Thinly veiled main plot to justify the romantic subplot. This is Titanic. This is going from the UK to New York on a ship as an excuse to have this man and woman on a ship in close quarters for how much of a week, or like 2 months, right? This is the two people who can't afford to rent alone, so they become roommates and they fall in love over the series, right? This is that. This is the whatever cheap excuse you need to put these two people in proximity or have their lives collide, right? And the audience generally accepts that, like, the subplot, what would normally be the subplot, which is the romance, is actually the main plot, and whatever the thing that like the story is selling as the main plot is, doesn't really matter, right? Like, there's like if the Titanic never gets there, they don't care, because they were never there for the Titanic. They were there for the romance and for the the period piece that is like the 1910s, which is what Titanic is set in at. So true, it tries to capture that period piece, right? The the audience never cared about getting to New York; they cared about being on the Titanic, right? And then target audience determines explicit content. This is very important. Please do not make a book for middle schoolers or preteens with explicit sexual scenes. Do not be that person. Please. The fact that I have to say this tells us how far humanity has fallen already. Right? Middle grade would be a light crush or holding hands or friendship. Young adult can be sexual, but it is always safe in that age range to fade to black, which means when it's about to get intimate, this you just skip to when it's over, right? You skip to them waking up the next morning or eating breakfast next morning or whatever it is. This is personally what I do in all my books because I just don't want to deal with writing that or people who or like writing that or having comments about that. And then adult can be as graphic as you want, but it is always good to consider the characters' ages in your story when writing stuff. Too many people don't, and things get weird. Okay, we don't need like young teenagers doing this kind of stuff in books. At least not anymore. Um, Expected character plot setbacks and backsliding. Backsliding is when you make progress and then you go back. In romance, you have an exception, right? Because in romance, what the character know and what the audience knows are two different things. So in romance, the characters aren't fully aware of their own emotions. So if they think they're broken up and they'll never love each other again, the audience knows like, okay, we have 200 pages left. These guys are gonna fall back in love. So that's why romance gets away with mid in the middle of the book. They can destroy all the progress and have them break up. In any other book, if they said, okay, we have 50 out of the 100 pieces we need to build the device, and they threw them all away, the audience would feel betrayed and hate the book. But romance gets a pass because we know that these people are going to get back together because they love each other and they're just being dramatic because it's a romance book, right? And at the end, the characters are expected to get together or at least admit they love to each other by the final page. If you have a romance and you don't do this, people will be very upset with you. Okay? People read romance for this. They want the build up, the tension, and they want the payoff, which is this. Now, romance plot example, right? Titanic. Using Jack and Rose from Titanic movie. The genre is romance, adventure, tragedy, period, peace, and forbidden love. Romance and adventure, obvious, right? It's romance because it's Jack and Rose. Adventure because they have an adventure on the ship. They're exploring different lifestyles and stuff, right? With him being poor and she being rich. Tragedy because it is Titanic. They all die. Well, Jack dies because Rose doesn't share the door. It's a period piece because it was made kind of like the Great Gatsby to capture the 1910s. I think the Great Gatsby was the Roaring 20s, 1920s, and Forbidden Love because rich girl isn't supposed to be with poor boy, right? Very simple. The promise, character promise. Jack is going to New York to start a new life. Rose wants to get out of her suffocating life of being a rich woman. Yes. And they fall in love. That is the character promise. The overall story promise, right? What we're sold on at the beginning. The journey plot. The Titanic is sailing from Europe to New York. But as we just discussed, nobody cares about that. We care about the character promises in this because this is a romance adventure, not a epic fantasy adventure, right? Epic adventure. The progress. Time spent together, right? Learning from each other, aka switching lines, which is Jack dresses up fancy and goes to the captain's dinner, right? Wearing a suit he could never afford and all that. And Rose goes to the lower decks and parties with the poor people. That's part of their progress. They spend time together, they learn about each other. And then romantic escalations. They go from dancing to holding hands to kissing to having sex in the back of somebody's car, right? And the backsliding when Jack is threatened and doubts if he can ever be with Rose because he's poor, right? But the audience accepts that like it's a romance, so they aren't going as far back as they think, and they eventually get back together. The cherry on top, There is none for this. It's a tragedy. They die, right? And the overall story progress, it's a journey plot. They never show a map once. They never even say how far they are from New York because it doesn't matter. It's literally that worthless to the story. It's just an excuse to get them onto the same boat, right? And the payoff, the character payoff, they fall in love, they experience new things together. The cherry on top, usually the cherry on top for this would be like happily ever after. But no, that's kind of an expectation, right? So the cherry on top would be it's difficult to do in romance, but there's no cherry on top. It's a tragic ending. The overall story, get in New York. The twist is that they don't get in New York because there was no foreshadowing for the iceberg. It just happened, right? And the cherry on top, again, there is none. But for this, there couldn't be a cherry on top because because you the destination is set. You can't say you're going to New York and then end up in like I don't know the moon. It wouldn't make sense because it's a period piece, right? And now we go to thriller slash mystery. The market expectations. First person or third person limited viewpoint. They don't do omniscient because omniscient again you have to be honest with the audience and you have to reveal everything. And if you do that, you destroy the atmosphere and the suspense of a thriller or a mystery. Unless you do a mystery where the detective is the killer and it's from his point of view and he's trying to frame somebody else during the investigation, which I think is a fun idea. But aside from that, I don't think omniscient is a thing for thriller. Page turner pace, atmosphere and suspense, we've been over this. You want them flipping through the pages, you want the atmosphere and the suspense to carry the pages, right? You want them to feel what the character is experiencing. Not the pain, but the tension. Relatively short word count, 20 to 100,000 words. Yeah, novellas are around 30,000 words, and the upper end of like a novel is 100,000. And remember, you ideally want someone to flip through this in one sitting, so that they buy your next book or they get the next one in the series, right? So if you have one of the Nancy Drew books, they are like what 50 something, if so little Nancy Drew books. So if somebody buys one and they flip through it in one sitting, they'll just grab the next one and then grab the next one, right? And this is probably might be the most important thing. The mystery must be solvable by the audience. You must leave sufficient clues for the audience so that they can solve it before the character. Okay? This is why people read mysteries. They want to see if they're smarter than the detective. They want to know if they could solve it first. They, not all mysteries, granted. Sherlock Holmes is one where people read it because they're curious about how Sherlock Holmes solves it because he's the best detective ever, right? They still try to solve it, but if they don't solve it, they aren't that upset because he's supposed to be like that much ahead of them in terms of solving mysteries, right? But yes, you want the mystery to be solvable. You do not want to cheat the audience. You will piss off your entire audience for a mystery book, and the mystery will be solved by the end of the book. That's our expectation. Nobody wants a mystery cliffhanger, right? And if it's a thriller, the culprit will be found by the end of the book. This does not mean that they'll be captured or defeated or anything. It just means that the audience and the detective or the survivor character will know who it is, right? And now let's get to the plot example. Um, I don't, I could find a good popular movie, right? So I just went with like something generic where you could fill in everything, and the promise of you see like a lot of movies, and I haven't read any mystery books, but a lot of movies, what they do is they cheat because they have film, they have visuals and sound, right? So they can make cheating the audience entertaining. Like all of the Sherlock Holmes movies, those don't make the mystery solvable for the audience because the the movie isn't third person omniscient, but it can only be solved in first person from Sherlock Holmes' point of view. It can only be solved by things that only he sees in a scene, that only he knows in a scene, right? So for a mystery book, I'm keeping it very simple, right? The promise, character, the detective will be competent and entertaining. This means the main character, right? Whoever is solving the mystery. The overall story The mystery will be solved by the end of the book. That's the promise of the genre. Progress, personal relationship and development with other characters or with self. Backsliding, second guessing their self or other characters, right? The cherry on top. The detective solves his personal goal alongside the mystery. So if the mystery is that there's a killer in the place and that killer happens to be the person who killed his someone he cares about, right? It combines and to be the cherry on top. The overall story, again, the mystery is solved, and the cherry on top solves another mystery, like the example I just gave. He avenged his loved one, right? The payoff, again, satisfying conclusion. This does not mean a, they win or they lose. This means satisfying. This means the audience sits back and says, "This was this was an enjoyable read." This doesn't mean he has to catch the person. It means how the book unfolds is satisfying, which is very important because in a lot of mysteries the killer gets away, right? But it's still fun. But because the audience knows the answer, right? Even if they didn't catch the killer, catching the person isn't the point. Unraveling the mystery is. And the cherry on top, again, it depends entirely on the character motivation. Overall story plot, solve the crime or the riddle, right? That's the idea. And the twist is usually you learn too late that there was a second crime or another person involved. So this is everybody in the mansion is questioned, and they learn that the person who killed the owner of the mansion also robbed the safe. They find the killer, and then they realize the person who killed the owner was not the person who robbed the safe. That was somebody else, and that person could have been working with the killer, right? So there's a second mystery, and that's the twist. The twist was that the mystery was only half solved. It's satisfying, but it leaves an open door for a sequel. And the cherry on top is that the crime was bigger than the audience thought. So if you thought you were just solving a missing a jewelry crime, and then suddenly you realize, oh, you've caught the killer of this person, then yes, that's a cherry on top, right? And now we go into horror market expectations. Okay, fast paced page turner story. This is mandatory. If you cannot write fast paced and suspenseful page turners, horror is going to be very difficult. Average word count is usually no more than 100,000. Um, but the trick with this is pacing, right? So you want to space your pacing so that people, their emotions are always high and low, high and low. If you keep them low, they'll get bored and put down your book. If you keep them high up, they'll eventually just feel mentally and emotionally exhausting, and they'll need to take a break from your book, and they won't want to jump back in at a high, so they won't pick back up your book. So you want to have a cadence where they start here, they go up for a while, then they come down, they go up for a while, then they come down, and ideally they would get used to that cadence, so they would stop at the bottom of one of the valleys, and then they'd start back, and then they go up again. This is what you need to know to write horror and thriller too. Like anybody that wants to evoke a emotion like fright from person or like tension. Vivid descriptions are needed for a lot of things in horror, right? Tone and atmosphere consistent. You have to keep it consistent. If you're going with like some grim, dark, misty night forest, then you have to keep it consistent. You can't suddenly shift tones without good reason. And believable character interactions and choices. This is one of the most important things. This is for every single story and book type, but it's especially prolific in horror. Because in horror, if you've ever seen a horror movie and you've seen someone make a stupid decision just so the director can have the villain kill them off, right, in some gruesome spectacle way, that does not apply in books, because in books we don't have the special effects visuals. So whatever the character does has to make sense for the character. It doesn't have to be smart. It just has to make sense for the character. They have to be consistent. You can't have them suddenly stop thinking or stop acting like themselves because you want them to go down the dark hallway where the guy has a knife dripping blood. Okay? So you have to select your characterization and keep it consistent. And horror plot example, the promise, right? This is a simple like Lost in the Forest hunting you down plot. The promise, right? The the character survive or face their fears. A lot of horrors is face your fears, right? Monsters like it, face your fears. The overall story, survive, escape, or journey plot. You need to go from here to here to survive, right? So 1 to 2. The progress, character progress is health status. If they're bleeding out, if they're like in paralysis or something like that. Clues to escape, so saw, right? If they have to figure out their way out, saw or escape room. Courage and desperation, for it, they have to face their fears, at least for the movie, and emotional state. So if the character is having a mental breakdown and that is constantly making it more difficult for them to survive, that's emotional state. Or if they need to calm themselves so that they can escape, that's emotional state. Backsliding, mental breakdowns, turning on each other if it's a group. So if it's like a group in Saw and they turn on each other, that's part of it. And characters dying. If you need numbers and your group keeps getting thinned out, that's progress. That's getting close to the end. Overall story is usually survival or escape. And the payoff, character, satisfying conclusion. Not happy conclusion, but satisfying. Because sometimes you just want everybody to fail in the story. And you just want the killer to win. Just fine. If it's intended to be like that, it's fine. The cherry on top is when survival becomes triumph. You you go from trying to escape to defeating the monster, right? You go from running away from Jason or Freddy to fighting them. This has been overdone in recent movies where horror becomes action adventure movies. But in a good book with this, it'll be good because you get to go from every step, from the character having mental breakdowns to them, to their survival becoming triumph, right? And then overall story, survival, escape, that's the payoff. The twist is usually betrayal or it was all for nothing, so at the end they die anyway, and tragic ending. And the cherry on top is if they find people like them and they lead them out to survive, right? Horror's done, so now we get into my baby, fantasy sci-fi, and we're keeping this together because they're so similar, right? Yeah. So, fantasy sci-fi, market expectations, first or third person limited, right? Third person omniscient is what I write, but it is difficult to write. Less than 10% of current sci-fi fantasy authors in the market today write this, and every year that number decreases, right? Because the market is going towards characterization as the selling point. And in first person and in third limited, it is very easy to put people into the character's head, to get them to care about a character. In third person omniscient, your plot and your structure and your character have to all be really good to carry the story. And if you had to choose one of those to be super strong, like 80%, and the others at 10, your character would be 80%. So going first person or third person limited naturally puts you at a better chance of winning because the one at 80% is so much easier to get to the maximum of, right? So I fully recommend, do not do what I do. Do not write third person omniscient, right? Save yourself all of the headache. I mean, granted, it came naturally to me, but like for most people, first person is a lot easier, or third person limited is usually the standard for like sci-fi fantasy, right? So when I'm doing point of views, I'll show you how to write all, but I recommend trying your hand or like trying to read some of them, right? There's a reason we're skipping second person for all of these, and second person is either used very deliberately or in third person omniscient you can use it. And this is why third person omniscient is kind of very difficult because you have to know how to use all of these and you have to jump between them. So like I would go third person omniscient sometimes, then go all the way to like to almost first close person, then the third limited, and then the second person, and then go back. And I would do all out in one page, and it's a lot. It can be messy if you get it wrong. It'll confuse everybody. So third person limited is very safe for, for fantasy sci-fi. Now tense, past or present tense. I write present tense because omniscient sounds very good in present tense, right? It's telling you exactly what's happening, when it's happening, and it can speak into the future. Past tense is the standard though, and people will feel weird when they read present tense and they've only read past tense. But After about 1,000 words or so, it kind of, our brain filters it and it disappears. It becomes invisible. It's like how if you read he said, she said, like twice, your brain filters it out and it just sees dialogue. So once you keep it consistent and you don't flip flop between them, which I'm currently working on, because sometimes I find myself using past tense because when speaking out loud, it sounds better if you're reading or writing out loud. But I have to stay consistent with one of these. But yeah, past tense is always safer for writing, and magic and more market expectations. Magic system. Magic system means in fantasy magic in sci-fi technology. Okay, some sci-fi like Star Wars has magic and technology, like the Force and lightsabers, right? But magic system just means power system. It just means whatever energy system, right? Spy gadgets in a James Bond movie is the magic system, right? Guns in John Wick is the magic system. Guns and those indestructible suits, right? Non-human races are very common in this. People want people define sci-fi fantasy by the world building, but the world building is also the least important thing. Funny enough, so world building is what gives it its name, but world building is the least important out of um, plot and character. Character is the most important. Plot is second. World building is just the background, just is just the set dressing, right? And you need to know how much world building to put into it, which we'll cover all of that. I promise you. And then the sense of awe. A lot of people read fantasy for the sense of awe, the sense of scale, because sci-fi fantasy is the only place, is one of the few books where you can travel the stars, or you can see distant lands that can't exist in our world, or you can ride on the back of a dragon over the mountaintops, right? People want that. So sense of awe means people wanting vivid description of the world. They want to be able to imagine living there. They want to understand what it feels like to be part of that world. And two of the best examples of this are Avatar. The James Cameron one with the blue people does sense of awe really, really well. And
Yes.
The Last Airbender also does it really well, but on a smaller scale, right? So James Cameron's bigger scale, The Last Airbender is smaller scale. And now we get to the fantasy sci-fi plot example. So we did Star Wars before, which is more sci-fi. Now we're going slightly more into fantasy, using Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone movie, the movie, right? Because it's easier to break down the movie, more people have seen it. And the genre is fantasy, urban fantasy, because it starts in England, right? With magic in England, and the magic world is hidden. So yeah, um, portal fantasy because Hogwarts is kind of in another world, kind of. I know it isn't actually, but like they go through a portal and all this, so portal fantasy. Adventure because halfway through the book, movie, it becomes an adventure movie. Supernatural because ghosts. Middle grade because of the age of the protagonist. So generally, the age of the protagonist plus two is a plus or minus two is about the age of your target audience. And Harry's about 13, so 11 to 15-year-olds are writing, so reading this is about middle grade. Supernatural is because of the weird stuff. Paranormal is the ghosts, right? And it has a few more genre stuff. But for now, let's just focus on these. And then the promise, the character promise. Harry's life gets better. From chapter one, this is the promise. Harry's life sucks. It's gonna get better, and whatever is in the letter is going to do that, right? Overall story promise. Harry goes to magic school. That's the promise you get when you watch the trailer, when you pick up the book. Harry goes to magic school, right? Two very similar promises and they get fulfilled almost immediately. So everything after that is a cherry on top. Okay? There's a reason this book made up, this series made $1 billion. Progress. Character. Harry makes friends. He meets Ron on the train and Hermione. Right? Backsliding. There isn't really any. Some people think there is because the kids don't get along, but they're kids, so the audience knows that bickering is part of like what they do, right? The cherry on top, right? As soon as Harry gets to Hogwarts, he realizes you're the chosen one, Harry. So the first promise was fulfilled. His life got better, and he got to magic school. Now we need to fill it up with other things, right? So the character promise, the new character promise, you're the chosen one, and the new story promise is the magic school house plot, right? Gryffindor vs Slytherin vs Ravenclaw vs Hufflepuff, and there's no cherry on top for this one because it's all new. It's all new to him, so it's exploration, right? And the payoff at the end of the book, at the end of the movie, the character payoff: Harry, Ron, Hermione become great friends. That's the character payoff. The cherry on top: Harry proves he is the chosen one by defeating Professor Quidditch and Voldemort, right? Quirrell and Voldemort. Overall story: winning the House Cup and finishing year one because Dumbledore cheats. But aside from that, the overall story plot: he finished the first year of Hogwarts and he won the House Cup, and Gryffindor won the House Cup, right? And the twist: Quirrell is Voldemort. The cherry on top: Harry defeats Voldemort. So J.K. Rowling did this. She made two very clear, very painful promises, right? Because we want Harry's life to get better, and we want him to go to magic school, because we want to see somebody who isn't a loser. This is what I can do. Enjoy Harry Potter, by the way. I don't like loser main characters, but we want to see somebody who isn't a loser, and we wanted to know what Hogwarts was like. And as soon as we did that, she said, "Okay, cool. Harry's life gets better. Now he's the chosen one, and he has to compete with the House Cup to like get points for Gryffindor." And she replaced them immediately. Okay, this is how you do it. Everything after he got to Hogwarts is a cherry. After he got to the train to Hogwarts is a cherry on top. That's just extra scoops on the ice cream. The promise was fulfilled in like chapter 2 or 3. Actually, in chapter 2, when he met Hagrid, I would say the first promise was fulfilled. His life instantly got better. He got rich. He got a friend. He got magic, and then right after he got on the train to Hogwarts, next promise was fulfilled. He basically got to Hogwarts, right? So now comes the fun part, the part that if you watched my first video, I told you to do. I told you to go towards the self-fiction writing, which is fan fiction writing. This is where I made all my progress in learning to write. And for example, we will be using the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right, as our example. And ideally, these are all the building blocks that all the stories I've mentioned need, right? They need world building, dialogue, action, romance, adventure, tone, setting, power systems slash magic systems. Systems slash magic systems. And what you need to do is decide in your Marvel Cinematic Universe story which of these is more important than others. Which of these do you want to work on first? Are you good at writing fight scenes? Well then, leave everything else the same in whatever Marvel Cinematic Universe story you do, and change the fight scene. Write Captain America: The First Adventure and leave everything else the same, and just change the fight scenes. Right? And if it's a dialogue, leave everything else the same and change the dialogue. And you can keep doing that and cycling out what you want to change. Right? And when you master all of these, you can write an entire story, which is the point where I'm at now, which is why I'm using everything from my original book. Right? So you can pick and choose which building blocks you want to use at a time. And when you stop using one, you can put it back and then take out another one and try to fill it yourself. And then if it gets too difficult, you can take a break and cycle them out, right? And to find a premise for this, you simply ask what if. You don't need to mix two things, but you can say like what if Goku was in Marvel? You can do that if you want. I've seen it. But generally what you want to do is ask what if to keep it simple. What if you woke up as Tony Stark? What if you woke up as Spider-Man? Right? How would that change things, right? And you go from there. Or you can simply leave everything the same and change one thing. Just decide, I'm gonna write the action scenes different, I'm gonna write the dialogue different, I'm gonna write the romance different, right? And From this point, you create a simple plot using canon, using what Marvel Cinematic Universe did, and you write the movies, the shows in prose, in book form, to get a feel for it. And the time between canon events is where you practice original writing. So there'll be ideally Marvel Cinematic Universe quality stuff, and then there'll be a gap with just your stuff, and then there'll be more of it. So you can scale it however you want, right? Everything wouldn't be on you. There wouldn't be as much pressure, and you don't have to do everything at once. You do not have to learn all of this at once. This is why most authors fail. They try to learn every single thing they need to write a story at once, and it overwhelms them, and they give up. But you you don't have to do that. You can learn one thing at a time, right? Nobody's well, only you is timing you. I'm timing me, right? I have a timer, but like you can go at your own pace, especially if you're a hobbyist. Oh, this is like a 20-year plan if you want, right? And then after that, you write until you are comfortable, completely abandoning canon and using mostly original ideas. This is where you say, okay, I'm gonna stay in Marvel, but I'm gonna go into space. And where we don't have anything, I'm just gonna make up stuff. I'm gonna make up a planet with an alien race, with a war, and I'm gonna throw them into it. So you can still use, because remember, you still want to use the Marvel Cinematic Universe or like whatever fan fiction you choose, because you want the fan base, you want feedback. You need the fans commenting and telling you what you do wrong and what you do right, so that you can keep improving. So you don't want to go completely original as soon as you figure out how to write all these things. You want their feedback because you want to keep improving. You want the constant feedback loop I talked about in my very first video, right? Now you understand that. So you do all this and you filter the criticism to learn what you must focus on the most and continue improving until you can do it all almost subconsciously, right? Now here comes the fun part. I am going to fill out this right here, right now. Yeah, live, off the top of my head. And then I'm going to write chapter 1 in the next video, live, right? So everyone can see. And then I will do a breakdown of it, explaining how to do. I will do a breakdown of it, explaining how to do dialogue, prose, why I chose the things I did. But if you want a sneak peek of what that will effectively look like, I recommend just going to this video which I told you about earlier, right? My live stream, my latest live stream, my 7-hour live stream. Go into the comments and clicking here, and I will show you how I review a chapter, a one shot, and then how I rewrite it in what I would say is a better quality. But Sideshow might disagree, but I mean, yeah. So, the genre, right? I am a fantasy writer. Fantasy, adventure, action, romance. I'm keeping it very simple. We talked about Harry Potter just now, right? So I'll say, wizard school. Everyone has a different elemental magic, right? Kind of like the houses in Harry Potter, but everyone's like a different elemental magic. Fire, air, earth, water, right? The promises, the character promise. Main character, the main character wants money. He wants to be rich. The overall story promise. Main character has to what would be the overall story promise for this? Has to yeah. So this is the entire plot, right? He goes from wanting to be rich in magic school to end up potentially being the chosen one to fight the dragon. He decides to do both these things without he promises. Getting money is the character progress. Losing money is the backslide. Cherry on top, he becomes royalty. Overall story, he masters more magic. The cherry on top for that is he becomes chosen one. He then provides for his family back home as a payoff. He becomes nobility and moves on to a fertile land is even better. He defeats the dragon, is the overall story. The dragon was wronged by the kingdom. And then he tames the dragon, right? So in summary, decide on the larger story idea. Decide on the target audience and genre. Decide what type of plot, progress, and payoff you want. If you can't figure it out, if you can't figure out one, just skip it for now and it can always be added in later. Don't stress characters too much. Those are 80% of what makes a good book. So we will dedicate so much time to them later on. And the next video is all about the actual writing, perspective, tense, prose, and some character. And I'll be writing the first scene of it live, so you can see firsthand exactly how I do things. So timestamps are down below. All my links are also down below or on the screen right here, right? Um, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, feel free to join my Discord or drop a comment here, and I will be sure to answer it in either the replies, a live stream, or the next video. So, have a good one. See ya.